our bodies to get really good at being able to drop into all of these skill sets when the heightened situations come up, which is also where these are necessary, but harder to access when we're really activated. Okay, I'm just going to check at time. I think we're just great. So now we're going to move on to collective skill sets for conflict resolution. Those were all things like you can do on your own. You can practice in your own time, in your own way, inside the garden, outside the garden. So these are collective skill sets for conflict resolution. So for me and for so many others who practice forms of conflict resolution or transformative justice, folks in that category, we always want to do a lot of work beforehand to try to prevent conflict from happening. That is like the biggest chunk of skill sets that we can do. It's great to be able to show up when conflict already happens and we can figure out how to resource ourselves. But there's so much we can do before conflict ever occurs and maybe does not need to occur that actually is the solution for a lot of what comes up. So if we can do some before skill sets, so working to create a secure, supportive environment where trust and mutual respect are fostered. So this is not something that happens overnight. This happens with a lot of intention, a lot of those soft skills, a lot of showing up and engaging with people as real human beings, meeting them where they're at, making them feel valued, and showcasing their value to them and being explicit about their value is going to start to create that secure, supportive environment. If you're in a leadership position, being a person that demonstrates openness, accountability, kindness, gentleness, and communication skills is going to be such an important part of how people feel safe. When people don't feel safe and they don't feel trusted, or they don't feel like they can trust other people, conflict is going to happen, right? Conduct frequent meetings where small and medium issues can be discussed before they lead to larger issues. So this can happen whether you're in a very structured environment or not. You can still have regular meetings where you know that the premise is that you guys are going to get to go through any kind of small or medium scale issues that come up. That's going to help you not have that resentment built up. That's going to have you not having those little nitpicky things that end up building up into this kind of tsunami of feelings and anger and resentment that often happens because we just actually don't have enough space to talk about the smaller things that come up that kind of get at us over time. So setting that up is going to mean you don't have to deal with the tsunamis as often. Creating very clear roles, responsibilities, and channels of communication. So again, this doesn't have to be like a hierarchical structure, but that everybody really gets what's going on. Everybody really understands, and there's frequent check-ins to make sure that everyone kind of gets it. Not in a patronizing way, and it doesn't have to be super formal. You don't have to write it out if all of those things don't feel right for your group. But just making sure that if anything shifts or changes, everyone really trusts and knows that they're going to be informed and that their consent and that their opinions are going to be valued. All right. And then creating codes of conduct and procedures for how conflict does get addressed. Again, you can do this whether it's formal or informal, but you do have a process for conflict management in your space, in your group, that you all agree to, that you all understand, and say like, okay, we know at the meetings every 2 weeks, we're going to be able to deal with small things that have come up if we haven't been able to talk about them with other members. And we know that if conflict gets really big and it feels really huge, that here's the process that we go through. Maybe it's a person on the team that you talk to that has been trained in conflict management, or maybe it's that we have a process where two people sit down with a third person present as a witness or as a space holder, and as a person who can help to mediate the conversation. We know that we have that in place if we need it, as opposed to scrambling and struggling to figure out a process when everybody's already activated. That's a really hard time to do the structural planning necessary to make sure that goes smoothly. So it's much better to do that in advance and everybody just knows what's up. Everybody's on board with what that process is going to look like if and when it happens, as opposed to being like, oh my God, now everything's fallen apart. Everybody's mad at each other. I don't know how to talk to these people, and nobody knows how to have a process. That's not a good time to create the process. So do that beforehand. that's going to help ease that situation. And then during conflict, so now we're in it, what can we do, right? So how can we make this process go a little smoother once we're actually in the conflict or having the conversation? So there's a concept called creating the container, which is stating the intentions for conversation. We talked about this a little bit already. So grounding in your collective goals of trust, care, and positive hopes for the future. So starting out the conversation saying, I am bringing this forward because I really care about you, or I really care about the garden and XYZ goals that we all share. The reason that I want to have this conversation today is because I want to move through this conflict and get us all back on track to where we all feel really safe and that we can trust each other and that we can move forward. Whatever that is, you're creating the container so that everybody knows why you're bringing this up and what your intentions are and what you're hoping for. Again, it doesn't mean that everything's going to go well and it's all perfect, but it's a great way to start things off so that we all are grounded in that shared connection of the goals that we have. Mirroring is also a skill set that you can try out. These are skills that are going to take you a long time. So just because I'm saying them in a short list doesn't mean it's just like, oh, now I just do it. But mirroring is also a communication skill where you are reflecting back to the person what they've just said to clarify and affirm mutual understanding. A lot of times, based on our own stuff that we have going on in our own brains, someone is saying something to us and we interpret it totally differently. They're saying one thing, our brain is saying a totally different thing to us about what they've just said. So mirroring is the process of being like, okay, so what I'm hearing is XYZ. And then they can say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Or they can say like, no, like that's not what I'm getting at. And then maybe they'll try to say it in a different way. But so mirroring helps us to not just have a conversation where it's like, I'm saying this and you're saying, okay, great. Because if I'm not mirroring, especially in conflict where our emotions are high and that therefore our trauma responses or, you know, kind of the little child versions of us inside that are worried about conflict, they may not be hearing what that person's actually saying. So mirroring is a really helpful tool. It's pretty easy to implement. And it's one of those things that you guys can put into that shared agreement of like, when conflict happens, we're going to all try to practice mirroring and just see how it goes, you know. And you can do this in your relationships outside of gardens too, but it is a really good skill to make sure there's a shared understanding and that our stuff doesn't get in the way from really hearing other people. Centering curiosity. This is my number one thing that I'm doing. I try to do all the time when I am in conflict with folks or I'm just in conversation in general. So asking more why questions to get at the heart of the issue or the behavior. So the why helps us fill in the blanks that we often leave up to our own assumptions, right? So the why is often the thing that we're missing from that ladder of inference. The why is often missing from a lot of our conversations. So, you know, maybe this person is acting in ways that aren't helpful and don't aren't helpful to the goals and the visions of the collective. So if we get curious enough to kind of ask why, maybe we're going to reveal that something really hard is going on in that person's life, or they're being activated in a way that we didn't understand. Then that just being heard ends up being enough for that person to de-escalate some of the behavior that they're having and feel seen and heard and supported. Sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's things that are really hard to resolve and take a lot more work, and sometimes they don't. And if we ask more why questions, sometimes we are surprised at what comes out and that the conversation goes in a totally different direction and is more human because the why brings in the humanity of the situation. So it's also just something to think about, you know, asking the whys when things are coming up. The last thing I'll say, and I think I'm on time. Oh, I'm just on time. Great. So if you are in a position of relative power in your garden, so these are some questions that you may want to ask yourself to ensure that you are not abusing your power. You're not holding an unrealistic or an unbalanced amount of power over others. If you've been chosen to be in a position of power, that's totally fine. And you can still do these check-ins. So how do I allow other voices or ideas to be heard? Like, so not just my own. So what's the process of that? What procedures are in place to keep me accountable to the power my position holds? So what are the processes that you have to make sure that you're not holding that much power? How do you remain accountable to other people? What do the check-in processes look like around that? Do I reflect the cultures, class, racial groups, or experiences most representative of the garden that I'm running? If not, should I be finding someone who does to replace me or to join me? That's a hard question to ask, but it's an important question to ask. Because if we are the person holding power, but we're holding power over a larger group of folks who do not have the same shared experience or identities as us, and we have a less marginalized identity than the folks that are under our care or under our leadership, we really need to think about how we get better representation at the leadership level. That's for everybody everywhere, but certainly in a garden as well. What kind of training have I had that helps me, equip me to manage the conflict with compassion and care? So if I am in a leadership position and I haven't done any kind of conflict management training, I need to think about getting more training, because that is going to be a huge part of my job. It's not enough that I just know how to garden. If I am responsible for the management of a group of people of any size, I need to make sure I am a very well-resourced conflict management person, because that is a huge part. I'm going to be the person who people are coming to with those issues. I'm going to be the person people are looking to as a model and as an example of how to move through those issues. So if you haven't had a lot of those trainings or those skills, I would get those as soon as I can and make sure that those are ongoing skills that I am honing, I'm practicing, and I'm demonstrating to my community and to my interpersonal relationships in general. It's a big skill that is ongoing and ever evolving, and there are so many wonderful resources out there right now, both books and also lots of trainings that are available online if you look them up. Okay, and now it's question and answer time. 3 minutes over, not bad.
Wow, thank you. What an amazing set of tools you just shared with us, Natalie. That's incredible. I think that's going to provoke a lot of thought for folks. Before we get to questions and answers, so if people want to drop their questions into the chat box, and I'll pick up some of them, but Chimu, Angela, Natalie, you may find some ones that you want to answer too. That's fine. Before I do that, Angela, did you have one thing that you wanted to add in?
Yeah, just very quickly, I wanted just to add in Greenest City. Well, first, Natalie, a lot of, I loved all the things that you spoke about. And Greenest City has two different, I just want to give an example. We have agreements that we make with groups that we work together with. And so we have two different kind of conflict resolution agreements or processes. And one is more of a very typical hierarchical, more colonial way of working through your conflict. So first try to work it out with each other, then you work it out with the supervisor, then you go all the way up to the executive director. But most recently, we've had the opportunity to also build a partnership with an Indigenous organization. And the Indigenous organization created a conflict resolution process that was more built around something that was more culturally appropriate for working together between a colonial organization and Indigenous organization. And in this case, it involved sharing circles. And so I think part of what Natalie was talking about, how important it is that cultural processes are also a very important part of how we resolve our conflicts together. And I just wanted to bring that up as an example.
Great, thanks, Angela. So I noticed that Natalie, you've already answered Katie's question about resources. So maybe we'll jump to Shaw's question. This is an interesting one. It's been observed that boundary conflict is more in community gardens than allotment gardens. What could be the reason for that, and how would you minimize that?
Okay, so I'm going to read it to myself too here, just so I boundary conflict. So boundary conflict, as in, I guess I'm thinking like physical garden space or personal boundaries. I guess I would be curious because that might be two different things, although they're related. Being really clear, again, like oftentimes if boundaries are being crossed in any way, whether it's your personal boundaries or your physical space, which is still your boundaries, it's because there's a lack of communication present. So people are not clear on whose space is where and who's allowed to take up what space. If a person actively knows and is very aware of whose space is what, and they are still taking up other people's space, that needs to be addressed, right? Because that person then is no longer in alignment with your goals, values, and intentions that you have for the space. So that person may end up needing to not be a part of the group if they are no longer aligned with those things, or they can't get in, they don't want to be aligned with those things. And obviously it's not just me that can answer these, like anybody, any of the facilitators can answer these questions too.
Timu, Angela, did you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Natalie. That was great.
Okay. Here's a very timely question from Janet. Due to COVID, we've not had the in-person meetings that we usually would have. As a result, our garden community hasn't gelled as well as it did in previous years. Any tips to foster a strong sense of community when we can't be together physically?
Yeah, do any of the other facilitators have any thoughts on that one?
So, well, this is Janet. I'll jump in here. One of the things I was thinking of, which would be to get people more involved in roles. So instead of a small leadership team that we have doing the bulk of the work, we're trying to start off this season by getting people more engaged by taking on a certain responsibility. And that way we're hoping that they'll foster a stronger connection to the garden, because last year, because of COVID, we got more people. So the group is larger. But going back to like Zoom doesn't, I mean, it's possible that if we have some more Zoom meetings or, you know, online meetings, we might get to know each other better, but maybe we should just go back to basics and do sort of role-playing games or something, or some sort of like thing to get to know each other. That we go back to the very beginning and just start some basic tactics to get to know each other. That's the only idea I have so far, but if other people have ideas, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I think that is great. And I mean, there are, you know, collective things that folks can do, like contributing recipes to a shared recipe book that everybody, you know, gets to download. Maybe everyone sends their recipes in and then they get sent out to everybody. That's something you can do virtually, but it's still connecting everybody together. So getting creative, but I agree, you know, doing games that you would do at like summer camp with each other in terms of get to know you stuff, like that stuff still lands so well when it comes to getting to know new people and just like being silly and having fun.
There was a message here from Kate Hamilton, which may actually be relevant to this. We introduced a stewardship model for the orchard beans for rock garden, depending on skills and abilities, working very well in terms of commitment and collaboration. So dividing up the tasks, but having the communication between the tasks so that people understand that there is a larger group there. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, I think that's great. And also I love the addition of you know, having roles meeting people where they're at in terms of their skills and abilities is incredible. That's going to ensure that everybody can show up as their best. And like if we're we're asking folks to do stuff that's outside their skill sets or abilities, or their time or whatever, then that's going to be disappointing, right? So everybody being really aware of their skills and their time and what their commitments actually can be, and then providing roles for those people is great. That means everyone's going to win and everyone's going to feel like they know how to show up.
There's a long message here, which I'm going to take one piece out of. I'm just going to remind people that if you have specific conflicts that are coming up for you as you're hearing this, we will have a second session where we can spend more time digging into specific examples and start to practice some of the great skills that we've heard today. So you may want to think about it from that lens. As if you're thinking of a particular story, think about some of the things you've heard today and how you would apply that in this situation. But Lowell brings up a point that I think is an interesting one about, as we were listening to Janet's question about interpersonal stuff when you're not in a physical space together. If you're using email communication, how sometimes that can be a bit more complicated in terms of picking up nuances, and a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings come from email. So Chimu, Angela, Natalie, do you have any comments specifically on what happens when you're reduced to that internet communication? Are there specific ways to negotiate that?
This is Angela. There's lots to this, but I do, you brought up, Rhonda, email. I really do not think that we can resolve conflict over emails. That I think Natalie brought up, that our intentions is to bring further connection between us, trust and hope. I have not had good experiences in trying to resolve something over email. Generally because I've interpreted things and I'm already angry, and so I interpret everything in the worst way possible. And I need to see the person. I need to look them in the eye and really try to build a mutual relationship of trust.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if an email is starting to veer into a conflict, that's a time where we have to set some other systems up for being able to talk with our voices, even if it's on the phone or if it's in person. And saying that some people's access needs are that they do better talking by email. So checking in with the person and seeing if they, saying, I'm starting to recognize for myself that I'm starting to, be activated here, and I probably am not hearing you well via email. Like, is it possible for us to have a different form of conversation? And that's self-work to do, to check in on that. And if that person is like, actually, I feel like I can't meet in person, I feel like writing is better for me. Then we can kind of decide, can we do a hybrid model, or can we meet that person where their access needs are at? So it is tricky though. There's no doubt that human connection and our ability to empathize and our ability to de-escalate is so much better when we are able to be in person and in a regulated space. So anything else other than that, we're just doing our best. So yeah, and I'm seeing here, Joss, like if you want to recommend anything in the chat, or you can absolutely use your voice to tell people about any resources that you have, that's so welcome.
And I just wanted to point out a message from Jesse. Some of our gardeners don't have Zoom. It's maybe a good idea to start with a phone communication, try to reach out to some who can share with others, sort of phone tree idea. So again, phone, you don't have the visual, but you can pick up so much from the tone of voice.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's, I mean, if that's what is available to folks, then yeah, just we got to meet them where we're at, where they're at. And again, COVID is not making us have the ability to do everything in an ideal way. So just having a lot of empathy for ourselves and others as we navigate what's possible for us right now in terms of communication and gathering and connection building, and know that it's not going to be like this forever, but being as creative as we can, and also recognizing there are some things that we just can't recreate when we're not in person together, and that's okay. It's sad, and it's also what's real. So just doing our best.
I wanted to read out Joss's comment because I think there's a couple of people who are calling in by phone who may not be able to read the chat box. Wanting to recommend online worksheets for nonviolent, compassionate communication. Provides practice to help build our language and communication skills to be more open and preventative, especially trauma-informed and harm reduction, oops, I can't see the bottom.
Framework.
Harm reduction frameworks, thank you.
Yeah, so again, Joss, if you want to type those and we can read them out, or if you want to unmute yourself, if you're still here, and recommend anything that you're thinking, that's great. I do have, so we have some events we want to say, but I also do have at the back here some resources that is helpful for folks. So you guys can have a look at this. There are some both courses that you can take, and also just books and references that you may want to think about reading or getting audiobooks for. So I just want to name that. And so that this is going to go out to you. And I would absolutely welcome if folks do have other resources they want to share. You can type them in the chat, or you can email us later and we'll send those out to everybody as well. This is just me coming up with some stuff, but I know that there's lots of other resources around.
And that was a question, whether the recording and the resources will be sent out by email, and the answer is yes. Perfect.
And then Angela, do you maybe we want to move on because we're just about past time. Do you want to move on to your event?
Yes, I'll do this very quickly. So our next workshop is Brave Spaces, working through complex scenarios. It just says scenarios, but they will be complex scenarios. That's on March 30th from 7 to 8. We will be presenting scenarios and reviewing the skills that we learned today, and problem solve together on what steps to take in different little breakout rooms and things like that. So that's that one, and you will be able to sign up. We'll send that information to everyone here, so who are participants here, as well as more broadly advertising it, but you'll have a chance to sign up there. There's a sourdough intermediate workshop happening on March 17th from 6 to 8, and you can see the little link there. However, what I suggest, because that's a pretty long link, I would just look up the Sourdough Bread 201 if you are on Eventbrite, as well as the Greenest City. It should be on the Greenest City website. So you'll be able to chance. That's an intermediate workshop. Okay, the next page.
Sorry.
The next one is Fresh Ways with Balcony Gardening, and that one is on Saturday, March 13. And you can look up the where that is and how to get involved, which is cdsaturday.ca. Conflict resolution with Deb. I don't have much more information on that, but it's another conflict resolution workshop. That's on Saturday, March 27. And again, you can also look that up on the website from cdsaturday.ca, because I know there were some challenges with getting on. And so we are offering other ways, other times for people to see these workshops.
Beautiful. That's so great. And I just wanted to, I was just typing in the chat box here, but I'll just say it with my voice that, just thank you for everyone who wanted to show up for this workshop tonight. And thank you for being here a little bit past time. And to just remind everyone that these are skill sets that are lifelong skill sets. We weren't taught these formally in schools in any way. These are skill sets that we are learning and unlearning at the same time. We're going to be messy. We're going to fumble. There's a great book called Fumbling Towards Repair even that talks about this. So just, take a breather after this workshop. It's a lot of information. Come back to this recording as many times as you want. Have a look through the resources later on, but just, thank yourself for showing up tonight for this really important workshop and these really important skills. And everyone in your life is going to benefit because you are trying to show up for these skill sets. So I appreciate everybody. And I think we're done.
All right. Thank you, everyone. If people can unmute themselves, if you want, just say goodbye. Goodbye.
you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bitch. Have a good one.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for the workshop. I think it was very, very nicely done. Very explanatory. And you can relate to the issues and learn how to apply them more forcefully. But I think it was wonderfully done. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello,
Thanks.
Esther. Good to see you.
Thanks a lot. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Very, very informative and educational workshop. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Shaw.
Yes, thanks, Rhonda and Natalie.
Thank you.